This is a screencast for Lesson 8 in Stephen's C# 24-hour trainer. This lesson talked about using standard dialogues to let the user select such things as font, folders, files, and colors. In this Try It, we're going to build this little program that demonstrates each of these dialogues, except for the printing dialogues, which we'll get to later when we cover printing. So here's the test program I've built. You can create it yourself on your own, put these controls on the form, but there's no point in making you watch me do it. It's just got some labels over here, some text boxes to display the results of the file and folder dialogues, and then buttons to invoke each of these. So if I double click on this one to create an event handler for the background color button, we can put our code in here. All of the dialogues follow the same basic approach. This is a three-step approach. You initialize the dialogue, display the dialogue and check the return result, and then do something with the result if the user clicked OK. So let's get started. Let's initialize the dialogue. So I'm going to say background color dialog dot color. That's the property that this dialogue is useful for getting, equals whatever the form's background color currently is. Now I'm going to display the dialogue. So I'm going to say if background color dialog dot show dialog equals system.windows.forms.dialog result.ok, then I want to take action. So the user picked a color and clicked OK. All I need to do is take the color that the user selected and do something with it. In this case, I'm going to set the form's background color equal to whatever the user picked. It's as simple as that. Now, whenever you start a new project by default, if it's a Windows Forms application, there's this using system.windows.forms directive up here at the top. So we really don't need this part. So I'm just going to take it away. IntelliSense puts it in there, but it's not necessary. And if you take it off, it makes the code a little easier to read. So let's run the program and see what happens. If I click this button, here's the dialog. Occasionally, if the form's background color is not one of the ones that the dialog can display, then this will come up with a default color selected instead of the form's real color. Once the user gets going, though, it should be up to date. So let me pick this sort of peachy orange color and click OK. And the form's background color gets changed. If I go here and I pick red and I click cancel, the background color does not change. All right, so let's do a couple more of these. And here's the font property. So for this one, let's see what I called my font dialog here. I called it form font dialog. I'll initialize the dialog as usual. So form font dialog dot font equals the form's font. Now I'll display it and check the result. So if form font dialog dot show dialog equals OK, whoops. And I'll clean the code up by getting rid of that. Then I want to take action. I'm going to say the form's font equals whatever the user selected. All right, the folder browser. In this one, doesn't initialize very nicely. You can set it. You can set its initial directory. Oh, hang on, where is it? It's you can set the root folder property. That will tell where the user can start browsing from. So if you want them to start at My Computer or My Documents or somewhere like that, you can set this. This is from the environment.special folder enumeration, and you can see the sorts of things that are in this list. Let me move it to a new line so it's easier to see. So there's admin tools, common documents, common music. A little farther down, here's the user's desktop, favorites, fonts, history, and so forth. Let's set this one to My Computer. Now we can show the dialog and check the return result. So if test folder browser dialog.show dialog equals OK, then we take action. And in this case, all I want to do is display the result in this text box, which is called folder text box. So I'll set that text box as text to the selected path property of the dialog. The open file and close file, or the open file and save file dialogs are fairly similar to each other. So let's see what I called the open file dialog. Test open file dialog. And here you can initialize this if you want to. In general, you don't, because these controls have an idea about where they were last. So if the user browses to a particular directory and you leave the file name and the initial directory here blank, then the dialog tries to do the right thing and behaves more or less the way the dialogs do in Windows programs in general. So it's not a bad thing just to leave that alone. So I'm not going to initialize this. I'll just display it. So if test open file dialog.show dialog equals OK, then we want to take action, and in this case we also want to display the result of the dialog in the text box. So, and here I'm going to display the file name. All right, so let's run the program and see what these things do. Hopefully they're working. Let's make sure we didn't break background color. We use this little orange or yellow. For the font, here's our font dialog. I'll go with Mistral Bold 18 point. Let's make it 16 point. Now you'll notice by default, if you make the font bigger, the font resizes to allow more room for the font. This one is kind of silly because this font is very small. Let me change back to something more reasonable. We'll go to Comic Sans Serif, make it a little smaller. We'll go to 12 point. Oh, and it made it bigger again. You can disable that feature, and in general I usually do. Let's do the folder browser dialog. You can see it started at my computer like we asked it to, and I can browse around in here. Let's look at this drive, users, developer. That's the root directory for this user. I'll pick OK, and it gets entered in there, c:users/developer. Open file. Initially it tends to start somewhere really strange until you do something more reasonable. So let me just browse to some place like this. This is the author review directory, and I'm going to pick all files. We'll pick my chapter 1 author review file. So that's how those work. The save file dialog works a lot like the open file dialog, except it does things like it'll prompt the user whether the user wants to overwrite the file if it already exists. And the print and print preview dialogs we'll skip for now because we can't really do anything useful to them until you know a little bit more about printing. So that's it for this application.